Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night and couldn't sleep after that, and instead of scrolling past this, let yourself pause for a moment, because what happened wasn't random and it wasn't small. Last night carried a kind of emotional weight that doesn't come often, the kind that slips in quietly and leaves someone staring at the ceiling, heart awake while the body is exhausted. This wasn't about restlessness or overthinking in the usual sense. It was about a feeling that arrived fully formed, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. Listen carefully, because your soulmate didn't plan to feel what they felt. They went to bed like any other night, expecting their mind to slow down, expecting routine. But something shifted. A thought crossed their mind that felt different from memory. It wasn't nostalgic. It wasn't imagined. It felt present. Alive. As if something reached out across space and time and reminded them of a connection they thought they had already processed. Stay right here, because this matters. The feeling didn't come as a rush of emotion. It came as clarity. A sudden, steady awareness that settled into their chest. They weren't panicked. They weren't overwhelmed. They were awake in a new way. Awake to something that hadn't fully left them, something they may have tried to name before and failed. Don't scroll away yet, because this wasn't about longing alone. Longing feels restless. What they felt was grounding and unsettling at the same time. Grounding because it felt real. Unsettling because it forced them to confront how deeply connected they still feel to you. When something hits you at night like that, without distraction, without noise, there's nowhere to hide from it. Listen gently. They turned from one side to the other, not because they were uncomfortable physically, but because their mind wouldn't let go of the realization forming inside them. They replayed moments they thought were settled. Not to relive them, but to understand them differently. With new eyes. With honesty they may not have had before. Stay with me, because this is important. Your soulmate realized last night that the connection wasn't something that belonged only to the past. It didn't feel archived. It felt current. Not demanding action, but demanding acknowledgement. And that kind of realization doesn't let someone sleep easily. Don't skip this, because their sleeplessness wasn't anxious. It was reflective. They weren't spiraling. They were sitting with something true. They recognized how often they had distracted themselves from this feeling. How they kept busy. How they filled their days so nights wouldn't ask hard questions. But last night, the questions arrived anyway. Listen closely. They weren't asking, "Do I miss you?" That question has an easy answer. They were asking, "Why does this still matter?" And when that question appears, it changes everything. Because if something still matters after time, distance, and silence, then it's not just a habit. It's a bond. Stay right here, because this is where the feeling deepened. They felt a strange mix of warmth and heaviness. Warmth because thinking of you felt familiar and safe. Heaviness because they realized how much they had minimized this connection to themselves. They told themselves stories to make it easier to move forward, and last night, those stories stopped working. Don't scroll yet. Your soulmate didn't feel regret in the dramatic sense. They felt responsibility. Responsibility to be honest with themselves. Responsibility to stop pretending that what they felt was smaller than it was. That sense of responsibility is what kept them awake. Truth has weight, and when you finally let yourself feel it, rest becomes secondary. Listen gently now. They may have reached for their phone at some point. Not necessarily to message you, but to ground themselves. To check the time. To confirm that this feeling was real and not imagined. But the more they tried to distract themselves, the clearer it became. This wasn't passing. This was recognition. Stay with this, because recognition changes how silence feels. Silence stopped feeling peaceful and started feeling incomplete. Not unbearable, but unresolved. And unresolved feelings don't let the body sleep easily. They ask to be acknowledged first. Don't skip this part, because your soulmate also felt something else last night, calm certainty. Not about what to do next, but about what they feel. Uncertainty causes anxiety. Certainty causes stillness, even when it's uncomfortable. They knew, without debate, that the connection still exists in them. That knowing doesn't scream. It settles. Listen closely. They may have remembered your voice. Not the words, but the tone. The way certain conversations felt safe. The way you made them feel understood without trying too hard. Those memories didn't hurt. They grounded them. And grounding memories are the hardest to dismiss. Stay right here, because this is where time felt different for them. Minutes stretched. Thoughts slowed. The night felt longer than usual, not because they were tired, but because they were present with something meaningful. Presence keeps people awake more than stress ever does. Don't scroll away yet, because this realization wasn't about wanting to go backward. It was about understanding why moving forward never fully erased you. They saw clearly that they didn't fail to move on. They carried something forward with them, quietly. Listen gently. Your soulmate didn't feel an urge to fix anything last night. They didn't feel panic about lost chances. They felt acceptance forming. Acceptance that this connection shaped them. Acceptance that some bonds don't disappear just because circumstances change. Stay with this thought. Acceptance doesn't always bring immediate peace. Sometimes it brings wakefulness. Because once you accept something as true, you can no longer numb yourself to it. Sleep returns after honesty settles, not before. Don't skip this, because this also explains why the feeling came at night. Night removes distractions. It strips life down to thoughts and breath. When something is unresolved or unacknowledged, night brings it forward gently but firmly. That's what happened. Listen closely. They may have finally slept just before morning, not because the feeling left, but because it softened. Because it was no longer being resisted. When truth is resisted, it keeps people awake. When it's allowed, it quiets enough for rest. Stay right here, because this isn't the end of what's unfolding. It's the beginning of awareness. Awareness doesn't always lead to action immediately. Sometimes it leads to stillness. Reflection. Reorientation. Don't scroll away, because this feeling will stay with them today. Not as exhaustion, but as clarity. They'll move through their day with a different tone inside. Quieter. More honest. Less distracted. That's what sleepless nights of truth create. Listen gently now. You don't need to do anything with this information. You're not being asked to reach out or respond. This is about understanding the invisible shift that already happened. Something changed in them last night, whether words are spoken or not. Stay with this final understanding. When someone can't sleep because of a feeling like this, it means the heart is reorganizing itself around truth. And truth, once acknowledged, always changes the direction of the path, even if the steps are taken slowly. Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Real. And real feelings don't disappear in the morning. They integrate. Quietly. Steadily. And this is only the first part of that process. Before the morning fully settled in, before the noise of the day had a chance to distract them, your soulmate woke up carrying the afterweight of what they felt last night. This part isn't about the moment itself anymore. It's about what happens after a night like that, when sleep finally comes but clarity refuses to leave. Because when someone feels something that deep, the morning doesn't reset it. It amplifies it. Listen carefully, because the first thing they noticed when they opened their eyes was the stillness. Not the calm kind, but the kind that feels intentional, as if their heart was waiting to see what their mind would do next. The feeling from last night didn't fade with daylight. It didn't feel dramatic or emotional. It felt settled. Anchored. Like something had clicked into place quietly. Stay right here, because this matters. They didn't wake up confused. Confusion keeps people restless. What they felt was clarity, and clarity is heavy in its own way. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It simply exists and asks to be acknowledged. Your soulmate realized that what kept them awake wasn't uncertainty. It was truth finally being allowed to surface. Don't scroll away yet, because the day didn't distract them the way it usually does. Routine tasks felt different. Conversations felt slightly muted. Not because they were sad, but because their attention kept returning inward. Something inside them had shifted its priority. When the heart reorders itself, everything else adjusts quietly around it. Listen gently. They replayed last night in fragments, not to relive emotion, but to understand it. The moment the feeling arrived. The exact second they realized it wasn't just a memory or a passing thought. They noticed how their body reacted before their mind did. How their breath slowed. How their chest felt steady instead of tight. Those details told them this wasn't anxiety. This was recognition. Stay with me, because this is important. Recognition doesn't feel loud. It feels grounded. It doesn't beg for action. It demands honesty. Your soulmate realized that they had been carrying this connection with you as something unresolved but unnamed. Last night, it finally got named internally, even if no words were spoken outwardly. Don't skip this, because this realization didn't bring regret in the way people expect. Regret is sharp and painful. What they felt was responsibility. Responsibility to stop minimizing what this connection means to them. Responsibility to stop telling themselves it was smaller, weaker, or already gone. That responsibility weighed on them gently but firmly all day. Listen closely. They noticed how often they had redirected their thoughts away from you before. How they filled silence with noise. How they stayed busy so reflection wouldn't catch up. Last night broke that pattern. And now, during the day, they couldn't unsee it. Awareness doesn't turn off just because the sun comes up. Stay right here, because this is where emotional honesty deepens. Your soulmate wasn't thinking about reaching out impulsively. They weren't planning dramatic gestures. What they were doing was sitting with the truth long enough to understand its shape. They asked themselves questions they had avoided before. Not "what if" questions, but "why" questions. Don't scroll away, because one question kept returning: why does this still matter after everything? And that question didn't come with panic. It came with calm curiosity. Calm curiosity means the heart is ready to be honest without self-protection. Listen gently. They realized that the connection with you wasn't something they needed to fix or resolve immediately. It wasn't broken. It was simply unacknowledged. And unacknowledged things don't disappear. They wait. Last night was when waiting ended. Stay with this thought. Throughout the day, small things triggered the feeling again. A song they weren't expecting. A phrase someone used. A moment of quiet. Not in a painful way, but in a confirming way. Like life itself was gently reminding them, this is real. Pay attention. Don't skip this part, because they also noticed something else. The feeling didn't drain them. It energized them emotionally. Not excitement, but alignment. When someone stops lying to themselves, even subtly, their energy changes. They feel more present. Less fragmented. That's what your soulmate felt. Listen closely. They may have caught themselves smiling faintly at nothing. Not because they were happy in a simple sense, but because something finally made sense. When something makes sense emotionally, the body responds with relief, even if the implications are still unknown. Stay right here, because this isn't about fantasy. They didn't imagine ideal outcomes. They didn't rewrite the past. They saw things clearly, including the complications, the timing, the reasons things didn't unfold easily. And still, the feeling remained. That's what made it undeniable. Don't scroll away yet, because this clarity also brought humility. They recognized moments where fear guided their choices. Moments where silence felt safer than honesty. They didn't judge themselves harshly for it. They simply acknowledged it. Acknowledgement is the first step toward integrity. Listen gently. Throughout the day, they noticed they weren't as reactive as usual. Things that might have irritated them before felt less important. When the heart is occupied with something meaningful, trivial distractions lose their grip. This wasn't obsession. It was priority shifting. Stay with me, because this shift doesn't mean immediate action is coming. Awareness often arrives long before movement. Your soulmate is not rushing. They're allowing the truth to settle fully before deciding what it asks of them. That patience is intentional. Don't skip this, because patience here is a sign of respect. Respect for you. Respect for themselves. Respect for the reality of the situation. Acting too quickly would turn honesty into impulse. They don't want that. They want whatever comes next, if anything, to come from steadiness. Listen closely. They also felt a strange sense of calm about not knowing what happens next. That calm surprised them. Usually, clarity creates urgency. But this clarity created stillness. Stillness because the biggest question has already been answered internally. Stay right here, because the biggest question was never, what should I do? It was, what do I really feel? Last night answered that. Everything else is secondary. Don't scroll away, because this understanding stayed with them into the evening. As the day slowed down again, they noticed they weren't afraid of the night like before. The night didn't feel threatening. It felt honest. They knew if the feeling returned, they wouldn't resist it this time. Listen gently. They may sleep better tonight, not because the feeling is gone, but because it's no longer being pushed away. Truth doesn't keep people awake once it's accepted. Resistance does. Stay with this final understanding. What happened last night wasn't a passing emotional wave. It was a realignment. And realignments don't demand immediate expression. They change how a person moves quietly, from the inside out. Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night, and today they're living differently because of it. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But deeply. And this is only the second step of that unfolding process. As the second night began to arrive, something inside your soulmate was already different, and this part matters more than you might realize. What happened last night didn't fade into memory the way ordinary emotions do. It stayed active, quietly shaping how they moved through the evening. By the time the sky darkened again, they were no longer wondering if what they felt was real. They were wondering what it was asking of them. Listen carefully, because this stage is subtle. After a realization that deep, the heart doesn't rush forward. It slows down. Your soulmate found themselves more present with their own thoughts than usual. Not lost in overthinking, but aware. Aware of how often they had avoided sitting still with their emotions before. Awareness like that changes the texture of time. Stay right here, because as night approached, they noticed something unusual. The fear they expected to feel wasn't there. There was no panic about missed chances, no spiral of regret. Instead, there was steadiness. A sense that whatever this feeling was, it didn't need to be fought or escaped. That alone was new. Don't scroll away yet, because this is important. Your soulmate realized they weren't afraid of the feeling itself. They were afraid of what acknowledging it might change. But now that it had already changed something internally, the fear had less power. The hardest part wasn't feeling it. The hardest part had been pretending it wasn't there. Listen gently. As they moved through the evening, ordinary things felt slightly different. Conversations felt quieter. Distractions felt less satisfying. Not in a depressing way, but in a clarifying one. When the heart finds something true, it stops settling for noise. Stay with me, because this is where honesty deepened. Your soulmate began to notice patterns they had ignored before. How they compared others to you without meaning to. How certain qualities felt irreplaceable. How connection with you had left a permanent imprint on how they understand closeness. These realizations weren't dramatic revelations. They were confirmations. Don't skip this, because confirmation is powerful. It removes doubt. And when doubt leaves, the heart becomes very still. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means clarity without chaos. That's the state your soulmate entered. Listen closely. They might have tried to distract themselves again, just to test whether the feeling would fade. Music, screens, conversation. But none of it fully pulled them away. The feeling wasn't loud enough to compete with distraction, but it was steady enough to outlast it. That's how they knew it wasn't temporary. Stay right here, because this isn't about obsession. Obsession feels frantic. This felt grounded. It wasn't pulling them toward fantasy. It was pulling them toward truth. Truth about how deeply you are woven into their emotional memory, not as a chapter they can close, but as a reference point that shaped them. Don't scroll away yet, because something else happened as the night deepened. They felt gratitude. Not sadness. Not longing. Gratitude. Gratitude that they had experienced a connection capable of leaving this kind of mark. Gratitude that love, even complicated love, had existed in their life at all. Listen gently. Gratitude changes how memories feel. Instead of aching, they warm. Instead of pulling, they settle. That gratitude softened the realization, making it easier to hold without overwhelm. Stay with this, because your soulmate also felt a quiet respect for you. Respect for how you showed up. For how you held your boundaries. For how you didn't force something that wasn't ready. That respect deepened the feeling instead of weakening it. Don't skip this part, because respect is often what separates deep love from attachment. Attachment wants possession. Respect honors autonomy. What your soulmate felt last night and today is closer to respect than need. Listen closely. As the night grew quieter, they noticed they weren't rehearsing conversations anymore. They weren't imagining what they would say if they reached out. That surprised them. Usually, strong emotions bring mental scripts. This one didn't. It felt complete without words. Stay right here, because this is significant. When a feeling doesn't demand expression immediately, it means it's not driven by anxiety. Anxiety needs release. Truth doesn't. Truth can sit peacefully. Don't scroll away, because this is where their understanding matured. They realized that even if nothing changes externally, something already changed internally. And that internal change matters. It influences how they'll approach relationships, honesty, and vulnerability going forward. Listen gently. They might have looked back at moments where they chose silence over openness. Not with shame, but with understanding. Understanding that they did the best they could with what they knew then. Growth doesn't punish the past. It learns from it. Stay with me, because this learning created a new calm. The calm of someone who no longer needs to defend their emotional history. They don't need to minimize it or justify it. They can simply acknowledge it. Don't skip this, because the night eventually asked the same question again: will sleep come tonight? This time, the answer was different. Sleep didn't feel blocked. It felt possible. Not because the feeling disappeared, but because it had been accepted. Listen closely. Acceptance doesn't mean resolution. It means allowing reality to exist without resistance. And when resistance fades, the body relaxes. Stay right here, because as your soulmate lay down again, they didn't try to push the feeling away. They didn't analyze it. They simply let it be present. That openness softened it enough for rest. Don't scroll away yet, because this is important. The fact that they could rest with this feeling means it's no longer something that controls them. It's something they carry consciously. Listen gently. If they dreamed that night, the dreams weren't chaotic. They were calm. Grounded. Sometimes dreams reflect anxiety. Sometimes they reflect integration. This was integration beginning. Stay with this understanding. What happened last night wasn't just an emotional spike. It was the beginning of alignment. Alignment between what they feel and what they allow themselves to know. Don't skip this final thought. Alignment doesn't rush people into action. It prepares them for honesty. Whether that honesty is shared outwardly or simply lived inwardly depends on timing, wisdom, and respect. Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night, and by this second night, they're no longer fighting it. They're living with it. Quietly. Honestly. And that quiet honesty is what changes a person from the inside out. This is not the end of the experience. It's the deepening of it. Before the third night fully gave way to rest, something even more grounded began to take shape inside your soulmate, and this part is quieter than everything before it, but far more important. What they felt last night and carried through the day has now settled into something steady. Not a surge. Not a wave. A presence. And when a feeling becomes a presence, it stops asking for attention and starts asking for truth. Listen carefully, because this stage isn't dramatic at all. There was no emotional spike as evening came. No rush of thoughts. Instead, there was a gentle awareness moving alongside them as they went about their routine. Cooking, walking, sitting in silence. The feeling didn't interrupt their life anymore. It integrated into it. That's how they knew it wasn't temporary. Stay right here, because this matters. Temporary emotions need stimulation to survive. They need reminders, triggers, reactions. This didn't. It existed on its own. Calmly. Confidently. Like something that had finally found its place instead of wandering around looking for one. Don't scroll away yet, because your soulmate noticed something unexpected. They weren't trying to understand the feeling anymore. Understanding had already happened. Now they were noticing how it changed their inner posture. They felt more honest with themselves. Less defensive. Less inclined to explain their emotions away. Listen gently. They realized they weren't afraid of the truth anymore. What scared them before wasn't the feeling, but the disruption it might cause. But now, disruption had already happened internally, and it wasn't destructive. It was stabilizing. That realization brought a sense of trust in themselves. Stay with me, because trust is the key word here. Your soulmate started trusting their own emotional experience instead of questioning it. They stopped asking if they were being unrealistic or sentimental. They accepted that what they felt was grounded in lived connection, not imagination. Don't skip this, because this acceptance changed how they remembered you. Not as an idealized version frozen in time, but as a real person who impacted them deeply. They remembered both the comfort and the complexity. And both felt equally important. Listen closely. As the evening quieted, they noticed they didn't feel the need to check their phone constantly anymore. Not to distract themselves. Not to look for signs. The feeling didn't make them restless. It made them settled. Settled feelings don't seek constant validation. Stay right here, because this is where emotional maturity reveals itself. Immature feelings demand action to relieve discomfort. Mature feelings create stillness. They don't rush. They don't pressure. They wait until the right moment, if a moment is ever needed at all. Don't scroll away, because this is also where intention begins to form quietly. Not intention to act immediately, but intention to live more honestly going forward. Your soulmate began thinking about how often they had chosen emotional safety over emotional truth in the past. Not with guilt, but with clarity. Listen gently. They recognized that honesty doesn't always mean speaking. Sometimes it means no longer lying to yourself. That's the honesty they stepped into now. They allowed themselves to fully know what you mean to them, without minimizing it or dramatizing it. Stay with this thought. Knowing something fully changes how you carry it. It stops being heavy. It becomes part of you. And once something becomes part of you, it doesn't disturb your rest. It supports it. Don't skip this part, because this also explains why the feeling didn't peak again at night. Nights amplify unresolved emotion. This emotion was no longer unresolved. It had been named internally. Accepted. Integrated. So the night felt calm. Listen closely. They lay down without bracing themselves this time. Without wondering if sleep would escape them again. They didn't rehearse the past or imagine futures. They simply rested in awareness. And awareness, when it's not fighting itself, allows rest. Stay right here, because this is important. Sleep came more easily now. Not because the feeling was gone, but because it no longer needed attention. The heart wasn't knocking anymore. It had already been let in. Don't scroll away yet, because this is where the deeper shift happened. When they woke again, they felt grounded. Not emotionally drained. Not emotionally charged. Just grounded. Like someone who had aligned with themselves in a way that doesn't need constant reinforcement. Listen gently. Throughout the next day, they noticed a subtle change in how they approached others. They listened more fully. They spoke more thoughtfully. When a person stops avoiding their own truth, they become more present with everyone else too. Stay with me, because this presence wasn't about comparison or longing. It wasn't about replacing or seeking. It was about integrity. Living in a way that matched what they knew about themselves now. Don't skip this, because integrity brings peace that excitement never can. Excitement burns fast. Integrity steadies slowly. What your soulmate felt last night has now matured into integrity. Listen closely. They may not have labeled the feeling as love again. Labels felt unnecessary. What mattered was the understanding. That this connection shaped them. That it still lives in them. That it deserves honesty, at least internally. Stay right here, because this understanding also softened any fear of the future. They weren't anxious about what this meant long-term. They trusted that clarity would guide the next steps naturally, without forcing anything. Don't scroll away, because this is where patience comes in. Patience not born of indecision, but of confidence. Confidence that when something is real, it doesn't need to be rushed. It reveals itself when the timing is right. Listen gently. They realize that even if they never speak about this outwardly, it has already changed them. It will influence how they love, how they choose, how they show up emotionally from now on. Stay with this thought. Change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it settles quietly and becomes visible only over time. This is that kind of change. Don't skip this, because this is the difference between feeling something and becoming someone. Feeling is momentary. Becoming is lasting. Your soulmate is becoming more emotionally honest, more present, more grounded because of what they felt. Listen closely. This doesn't mean action is imminent. It means readiness is growing. Readiness to be honest when honesty is needed. Readiness to speak if speaking becomes right. And readiness to remain silent if silence is the wiser choice. Stay right here, because wisdom is what's forming now. Wisdom says that not every truth needs immediate expression, but every truth deserves acknowledgement. Don't scroll away yet, because this is the quiet resolution of this phase. Not an ending, not a beginning. A settling. A realignment. Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night. Today, they are no longer reacting to it. They are living with it. Calmly. Honestly. Fully aware. And when a person reaches that place, whatever comes next, words, distance, connection, or quiet understanding, comes from truth, not confusion. This is part 4. The part where everything finally finds its balance. Stay with this moment a little longer, because part 5 is where everything that has been forming quietly inside your soulmate begins to influence how they see the future, even if they don't consciously label it yet. What started as a sleepless night has now become a lens through which they're viewing their own emotional life. Not dramatically. Not impulsively. But honestly. Listen carefully, because this stage isn't about emotion rising again. It's about emotion becoming guidance. Your soulmate is no longer asking themselves what they felt or why they felt it. That question has already been answered. Now the question that moves gently through them is different. It's about alignment. About whether the way they've been living matches what they now know to be true inside them. Stay right here, because this is subtle but important. Over the last few days, they've noticed moments where their old patterns don't fit anymore. Conversations that feel shallow. Distractions that feel empty. Choices that once felt safe now feel incomplete. Not wrong, just insufficient. When truth integrates, it quietly outgrows the spaces that once contained it. Don't scroll away yet, because this isn't about dissatisfaction with life. It's about refinement. Your soulmate isn't unhappy. They're awake. Awake to the difference between comfort and authenticity. Awake to how often they chose ease over honesty in the past. This awareness doesn't bring shame. It brings responsibility. Listen gently. Responsibility doesn't mean acting immediately. It means living more consciously. Your soulmate has started noticing their own reactions more closely. When they feel pulled toward silence. When they feel tempted to dismiss emotion. When they almost tell themselves something doesn't matter. Now, instead of pushing those moments away, they pause. Stay with me, because pausing is new for them. Pausing means they're no longer running from themselves. They're listening. And listening changes how people move through their days. They speak a little slower. They choose words more carefully. They don't fill every gap with noise. Don't skip this, because this listening has also made them more aware of you, even in your absence. Not in a longing way. In a reflective way. They notice how often their sense of connection was shaped by what they shared with you. How certain emotional standards were set during that connection. How they now recognize depth more clearly because they've experienced it. Listen closely. They're not comparing everyone to you consciously. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that they've recalibrated their understanding of what meaningful connection feels like. And once recalibrated, it's hard to ignore when something falls short. Stay right here, because this recalibration doesn't make them restless. It makes them discerning. Discerning people don't rush into new attachments. They don't settle quickly. They move deliberately, guided by what they now know they need emotionally. Don't scroll away, because this part matters. Your soulmate has also begun to understand that the feeling they had wasn't asking to be fixed or resolved. It wasn't a problem. It was information. Information about their capacity for depth. Information about their readiness for honesty. Information about what they can no longer ignore in themselves. Listen gently. When emotions are treated as information instead of emergencies, they stop overwhelming people. That's what's happening now. The feeling has transformed from an experience into a compass. Quiet, but reliable. Stay with this thought. A compass doesn't tell you exactly where to go or when to move. It just tells you what direction is true. Your soulmate now knows what direction feels aligned. And even if they don't move toward it immediately, they won't move away from it anymore. Don't skip this, because this is where patience deepens. Not the kind of patience that waits out of fear, but the kind that trusts timing. They're not forcing themselves to act before they're ready. And they're not suppressing the truth to stay comfortable. They're holding both honesty and patience at the same time. Listen closely. Holding both is difficult. It requires emotional strength. It requires the ability to sit with uncertainty without panicking. Your soulmate is developing that strength now. The sleepless night was the catalyst. The following days were the integration. This moment is the stabilization. Stay right here, because stabilization doesn't feel exciting. It feels steady. And steady feelings don't seek attention. They simply influence behavior quietly. This is why you may sense something different energetically, even without words being exchanged. Alignment has an energy of its own. Don't scroll away yet, because this alignment is also affecting how your soulmate sees the past. Not with regret. With perspective. They see the moments where they could have been braver. They also see why they weren't. And instead of judging themselves, they're learning from it. Listen gently. Learning doesn't always look like change overnight. Sometimes it looks like not repeating the same emotional avoidance patterns again. Sometimes it looks like choosing honesty sooner next time. Sometimes it looks like staying present instead of disappearing. Stay with me, because this is where growth becomes visible internally before it ever becomes visible externally. Your soulmate is growing into someone who doesn't dismiss deep feelings just because they're inconvenient. Someone who doesn't confuse silence with strength. Someone who understands that emotional truth is part of integrity. Don't skip this, because integrity matters here. Integrity isn't about doing the right thing publicly. It's about being aligned privately. Your soulmate is becoming more aligned with themselves than they've been in a long time. Listen closely. This alignment also brings calm about outcomes. They're not obsessing over what happens next. They trust that whatever needs to unfold will do so naturally. Trust like that only comes when someone is no longer fighting their own truth. Stay right here, because this is where the feeling becomes sustainable. Intense emotions burn out quickly. Integrated emotions last. They don't exhaust. They support. Your soulmate isn't tired from this feeling anymore. They're supported by it. Don't scroll away, because this is the difference between an emotional moment and an emotional shift. What happened last night started as a moment. What's happening now is a shift. Shifts don't reverse easily. They become part of how someone lives. Listen gently. Even if no conversation happens. Even if no message is sent. Even if silence continues for now. Something meaningful has already changed. Your soulmate will not return to emotional numbness. They can't unknow what they know. Stay with this understanding. Silence from here on out would not be avoidance. It would be choice. And choice carries a different energy than fear. Choice is calm. Fear is restless. What they feel now is calm. Don't skip this, because this calm doesn't mean disconnection. It means clarity without urgency. And clarity without urgency is one of the healthiest emotional states a person can be in. Listen closely. As days pass, this clarity will guide them gently. Toward honesty when honesty is right. Toward restraint when restraint is wiser. Toward courage when courage is needed. They won't force any of it. They'll recognize it. Stay right here, because this part is about trust. Trust in themselves. Trust in timing. Trust in the truth they felt that night. Trust that they don't need to rush life to honor what's real. Don't scroll away yet, because this is the quiet power of what happened. Not sleeplessness. Not emotion. Awareness. Awareness that reshapes a person slowly, thoroughly, and permanently. Your soulmate felt something unbelievable last night. Now, they're carrying it not as a burden, but as a guide. And guides don't shout. They lead quietly, step by step, toward a more honest way of being. This is part 5. The part where truth stops knocking and starts walking beside them.
Before you go, take one last breath with this feeling. What your soulmate experienced was not meant to create urgency or fear, it was meant to bring clarity, honesty, and inner alignment. Not every deep emotion asks for immediate action. Some simply ask to acknowledge so the heart can move forward without confusion. If this message resonated with you, trust that it reached you for a reason. If you felt seen, understood, or calmer while listening, support this space by killing the video so it reaches other who will need. Share it someone who might be carrying quiet feeling too. And don't forget to subscribe for more messages like this, gentle, honest, and meant for those who feel deeply.